A little bit of a microphone difficulty here. The tape isn't holding. Okay. Is that good?
No, not quite, no.
There you go. Let me turn it down.
Turn something.
I think that might be a little bit better.
No.
No? Is it one?
When you get the feedback.
Thank you.
Speaker in
Thank you.
that direction.
Thank you. Okay.
This one's open.
All right.
Terrible.
Is that better? Thank you all so much for coming. I'm Lola Britton, myself and Karen McCoy. Karen, please stand. Our co-presidents of the League of Women Voters in Salt Lake. We're extremely pleased to have you join us tonight for this very informative meeting. We have outstanding individuals to speak on the topic of SB 72 signed by Governor Herbert on March the 27th, 2013. This bill addresses the relocation of state prison, including the development of the current prison land. Before we begin our planned meeting, I would like to take a moment to remember today is the 150th anniversary of the Gettysburg Address. There were 7,000 killed and 40,000 wounded at Gettysburg. I have visited the battlefield at Gettysburg a number of times. Only the Vietnam Memorial and the Arizona Memorial bring as many tears to my eyes. It's even hard for me to speak of it. We should never forget what so many have given for our freedom. For each speaker, we will give 8 to 10 minutes to speak on the key issues from their perspective regarding the possible relocation of the prison and development of the existing properties. Questions and answers from the audience will follow after all speakers have presented their overview. The first speaker will be Steve Turley. In his 23 plus years of service with the Utah Department of Corrections, Steve Turley has worked in nearly every area of prison operations, including housing, transportation, and special operations. Steve worked his way up the ranks as sergeant, lieutenant, captain, deputy warden, and was appointed warden of the Draper Prison site in April 2007. He served as director of institutional operations from July 2010 until September 2013. Steve currently is the division director of prison projects. He has also served as past president of the Utah State Prison Employees Association, as well as the president of Law Enforcement District for the Utah Public Employees Association. Please help me welcome Steve Turley.
Oh, I understand. I love to serve right here.
Okay.
Okay. She left one little thing out of that little bio. At the end of it, I said, and I'm proud to be friends with Lola. So, shame on her for cutting out some that someone put in my bio. Anyway, it's a pleasure to be here this evening. I'm impressed with the League of Women Voters. There's been 9, 10, something like that, meetings that PRADA has held. Can y'all hear me? Y'all, you really want me to stand?
Stand up, podium.
Now I'm going to get nervous.
Yes.
There's been several meetings, I don't know exactly, I think 9 or 10. And there's been representatives at every meeting that PRADA's held. And those that have come need to be commended. They asked for a tour of the institution. Some of you I know, they're in this room, have toured the prison site. I opened that up. Lola just got 50 people wanting to come there. But I certainly opened that up to you to come and tour the prison. We had one date set, but I was unable to be there, and I want to be there. I could have had someone else take the tour, but I specifically want to be there and tour. We can take 10 or 12 at once, and so if we have to take 2 or 3 different groups, we'd be more than happy to do that. But so think about that. It's taxpayers' dollars that are at work there, and it really is a place where people rehabilitate. tonight, I'm not even sure really which way to go, other than I am comfortable in my position that the PRADA committee is going down the right path. With Chairman Summerhays, 2 down from me here, who is the chairman there. He does a wonderful job, and Judge Atherton and Mayor Smith are members of that committee. And I'm comfortable in the way that it's going. I was nervous to begin with. We have great staff at the penitentiary who go to work there every day. We have great inmates who live there and deserve the best. We have great volunteers, over 1,500 volunteers who volunteer their time to help offenders in different areas. I've traveled to many different correctional institutions throughout the nation. They are jealous of what we have in the line of volunteers. There's no other state that even comes close to, that I'm aware of over 200, and we have 1,500. And so we're grateful for the volunteers. We're grateful for those. We have a lot of students that come in and during semesters of school, and we're grateful for them. We have a great system when it all works together. Concerning prison relocation, there's many things we have to look at. We have to look at when people work, when people go to work, they move to an area that's fairly close to their work. And so when we talk about prison relocation, we need to talk about staff. Many staff members have lived where they live to go to work, to drive a short distance. Now we just move it, and a lot of them have to uproot, because if you add 30, 40 miles on a day, that's a lot of extra money and gas each month. I'm going to back up a minute, and Lane, I hope I don't take some of your speech, but I am comfortable with a consultant group called MGT of America, who is consulting, who are coming out. Many of their consultants come out from across the nation and are at the prison getting statistics, recommending new locations, some of which are very close, I know, to their current Draper site, which is good news. But we give them statistics, we give them stats, we tours and talk and meetings, and they're gathering a lot of different information. And I'll let Lane, that's all I'll say about that, and I'll let Chairman Summerhays go into that if you would like. But so we have to take that into consideration. We have to take visitors who travel long distances into consideration. The prison is old. There's many buildings that have lived their lifespan. So there's a span that there's a number of years that a building is good for, I guess, is the best way to put it. I'm not a contractor. But if it's good for 50 years, many of our buildings have exceeded their life expectancy. It's old. And so when you think, when it moved in 1951, and it hasn't stopped since. It's 24/7, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The doors are operating. The lights are on. They've never been shut off except a power outage. So you think of all that time where doors are moving, parts are moving. It's even hard to get parts for a lot of our working equipment. We have to fabricate them ourselves because they no longer sell parts for many of the sliding doors, locks, and stuff like that. We have to fabricate them ourselves because it's so old. And so, does staff deserve a new facility? I think they do. Do offenders deserve a new facility? I think they do. We're short on programming space. We're short education space. Speaking of education, we have a great team with Canyon School District. If the prison is relocated, will the district, whatever school district we're in, will they be as good as partners? I would certainly hope so. We have somewhere between 300 to 400 graduates every year of high school and GED certificates, which is a great thing for these offenders to get. Many of them are older in life, and they would have never had that opportunity. Let me say this, and some of you may laugh at this, but for a lot of offenders, it's good that they're in prison. It's good that they're in prison because they get an education, they get therapy, they get substance abuse therapy, they get sex offender treatment therapy. They learn how to communicate with people, and they would not get that if they would never gone to prison. And so I'm confident in the correctional setting that we have at Draper site, that rehabilitation is being met for those offenders that want it. Sometimes we can force them, but it doesn't sink in as much. It's like when you're telling your kids they have to do something, they're going to do it. They may not learn as much as if they just say, yeah, I really want to do that. And so as we put this whole puzzle together, would a new facility be nice? Sure, it would be. Modern technology. We have there's a thing called Johnson bars, just to give you a little history for a minute. There's a locking mechanism called the Johnson bars. And just to open one door is these big levers. Think of, even though I've never done this, think of Las Vegas and the slot machine. I've seen them work, but I've never pulled one. But think of those that you pull, and then you pull, and then you pull. We have to do that just to open one cell door. Rather than a modern prison would be a toggle switch, or a push of a button, or even now a touch on a screen, where our staff have to go like this just to open up one door. And so that just gives you a little history of the age of the institution. There are many buildings at Draper that are new, that have not, I have 1 minute left, that are new. For example, one of our programs out there is Reading for the Blind. Our offenders read into tapes. Those tapes are sent to the state library, and then those tapes go to hearing impaired people. That's a brand new building. It's only a couple of years old. And so not all the buildings are old there. But I want you to know that we are short on space there. We need more space. We need more programming space because the fact of the matter is 95% of our offenders parole. And they move into our neighborhoods. And we want them to be ready to face the re-entry back into society and be good citizens. And that's our goal. Okay, I'm done. Who's next?
95%, that's pretty impressive. So that's something for all of us to think about. Our next speaker will be Judge Judith S.H. Atherton. She was a district court judge for the 3rd District Judicial District. It serves Salt Lake County in Utah. She was appointed to the court by Governor Michael Leavitt in August 1995. In May 2003, Judge Atherton retired from the court, which was effective August the 1st, 2013. From 2004 until her retirement, Judge Atherton also served as a judge on the Mental Health Court. She received her undergraduate degree from Wellesley College and her Juris Doctor from the University of Utah College of Law in 1983. Before her appointment to the court, she worked as staff counsel for the Legal Aid Society of Salt Lake and also as an assistant attorney general for the Criminal Appeals Division. All right, can you hear me? Yes?
No.
No, I can project. I'm accustomed to doing it. I try to do so. I think I will be brief. However, being a lawyer, that's I say that with caution. But I'd like to talk really a little bit about this commission, this authority, by way of introduction, and tell you really what it is. And it is a legislatively created group. And so we are bound by the statute, and we are given in the statute that created this authority very specific charges. And they are to issue RFPs, requests for proposals, and they are very specific in that mandate. And as commission members, this is what we have to do, at least initially, and that's where we are now, and that's what we've been rummaging around with for the last few months, and we've only been meeting for not 4 months, I don't think. So we're new in the process, but we are mandated to issue requests for proposals, inviting persons to submit proposals on 3 different areas. There are 3 options here. 1, looking at a new prison development project, and by definition, that is a project for a new prison at 1 or more suitable locations in the state other than the location of the current prison, and includes the land on which the new prison will be built. Okay, so that's looking at proposals for relocation, getting land, and building a building. We may also invite RFPs for current prison land development project, and that is looking at the transfer of the current prison land into private ownership and the demolition of the current prison after it's vacated, or a combination of the 2. And so it's really quite limited, and as you read the statute initially, sure seems like the intent is to move this facility. And so this is where we are. You know, we are governed by the law, and that's what our job is. And with that, then, where do we go? How do we do this job? And I think the legislation also gives us a little bit of a hint on this. This is not a legislative group. There are 11 members. There are 4 legislators, 2 senators, 2 members of the House. There is Mayor Smith from Draper, chosen by that community where the prison currently sits. And then there are 6 of us that have been chosen really as citizens by the governor. And so it's meant to be, I think, a diverse group. It's meant to bring in the community in a very real sense. As has been noted, I think, there isn't a timeline on this. This is a huge project. However, there is certainly an impetus coming from the legislature to move. And so I think that's what Chair Summerhays has been really trying to balance during these few months. And I agree with Steve that that stepping back with MGT coming on board and stepping back and looking at a few things before we proceed is the appropriate manner. And we can't proceed anyway unless the governor and the head of DFCM, division, whatever it is, yes, facilities and management for the state, agree with this. So it's really not necessarily our call. So just to state initially then a couple of observations. I think, having been on the court and having dealt with criminal cases for about the last 15 years, almost exclusively, had quite a bit of experience with corrections and with sentencing and with the deficits. I think there are many deficits, and part of what I think this authority must do, and I think that's the direction this authority is headed in at the present time, is look at the things systemically. I don't believe that you can issue these unless you know what the product might look like. And I think that's where the authority in recent last weeks has moved. How can we request these proposals if we don't know what the product is going to be? And that's where we're being educated, and I hope this the consultant that we brought on will help us tremendously in that, because most of us are lay people. I think all of the members are pretty much lay people in terms of these specific issues, and we need education. So from my perspective, programming is exceptionally important. I think we fail in our criminal justice system in many ways. I don't think it's great to be in prison. I don't like sending people to prison, and I've sent many, many people to prison. I think alternatives systemically in our criminal justice system that will divert prisons, such as, I think it was mentioned, may have been mentioned already, the mental health courts, drug courts, alternatives to incarceration on many fronts are things we need to look at. In the United States, as we know, and we keep hearing, incarcerates more people than anybody in the world. And that is, I think, wrong. And so I think we're being able to have a forum at this point with the authority to step back and take a look at these issues, and a rare opportunity to look just beyond prison relocation to what we can do to better administer justice and better address the needs of the community. And I will end, but this is, I get on a podium when I talk about mental health court, but there's such a disproportionate number of people in the criminal justice system who are severely, persistently mentally ill, and in the absence of something like intervention, which we've been able to do to a greater or lesser degree of success in like a mental health court, these people end up living incarcerated. They live in jail because there's no place else. So the criminal justice system is the de facto mental health authority in the United States, and certainly here in the state of Utah. So that's one of the things that, that's an example of what I think this authority is beginning to look at. Can we get an idea of maybe something a little better? And before we can look at those issues, we the issues of what this new prison, if there is a new prison, looks like, we must address those issues. All right.
So obviously, 10 minutes is not enough time. Our next speaker is Mayor Darrell Smith, serving his third term as mayor of Draper. Darrell Smith has been seen a tremendous amount of growth in the area. His roots run deep in the community. His great-grandfather was one of the first settlers in the area. He grew up on a farm in Draper with 8 brothers and 1 sister. Oh, that poor woman. It was with his close-knit family he learned the value of hard work and commitment to community. After completing his chores as a youngster, Mayor Smith used to ride his horse in Corner Canyon. Nearly 50 years later, he was instrumental in preserving more than 1,000 acres of open space in the mountains east of Draper, now known as Corner Canyon Regional Park. Mayor Smith earned a bachelor's degree in business administration, and he served in the National Guard for 6 years. Please help me welcome Mayor Smith.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm glad there's as many here as there are. I mean, I guessed in my math there's close to 80. That's good. I was going to ask a question up front. I know it's risky to ask a question for raise of hand. Has anybody here ever volunteered out of the prison? Anyone? There's different ways of volunteering, but anyway. Well, that's good. I've had a couple of opportunities out there. And as we just said, without being too repetitive, I have lived and worked within about 2.5 miles of the prison my entire life. In 1951, when the prison was relocated and opened there, I was 7. So do your math, I'm 69. And I actually remember, and you know, I've never in my whole life felt like there was something to fear other than my mother. There were 8 brothers and sisters, 9 counting me. So when we would see the prison vehicles go up and down the road, she would herd us in the house and assume somebody had escaped. As soon as they quit going back and forth, we went back outside. You know, so I've never feared it, and I've never said, even now with the great community that we have and the growth that's happened there, that it distracted from the city. But that doesn't mean that things don't change. We all know that we live in a world of change. And I think what Mr. Turley talked about, he expressed some of those changes as a professional in the corrections, some of the things that he's seen. I think those of us who've been on the PRADA commission, I was on the first one in 2012, which that responsibility was to go out for an RFI, so request for information, which we did. And then I was chosen to represent our city last year after the legislative session to represent the community on the commission. I'm certainly not an expert, and I've certainly learned as much as probably anyone else there, even though with, you know, some of my background and understanding. I think all of us at times, as we've attended these meetings, gone on the tours and that, we probably become more confused or more undecided, I guess, of what we were really doing. I brought a little piece out of the editorial 2 weeks ago, right after the election. This doesn't mean anything other than it expresses how I felt sometimes. This was in an editorial after the election results. And maybe you read it, it was in the Desert News. It said, with 96% of the votes now in, we're 73% certain that 60% of the voters are 83% sick of 47% of our predictions 100% of the time. So I think we've had some of those feelings, and as people listen to the news and read the, you know, whatever's in the media about what's going on with the PRADA, they probably scratch their head a little bit too, and I wonder what's going on. I agree that I think it's been a good process, but I also agree that was stated that by the judge, or a good judge, in being a little more specific on SB 72 and what our responsibility was. I mean, there's a few, I mean, everybody can interpret that a little bit, but I still think from the legislators that are on the commission that we all try to keep reining ourselves in just a little bit to make sure we focus on that. Even though some of the best things I've done is go on some of the tours. When we went to Arizona, 6 weeks ago, I believe, there's 10 prisons in Arizona. We went to 4 of them, and obviously they've made a lot of job growth out of, you know, that in that state. One thing I noticed after driving nearly 2 hours way out into the sagebrush, where a lot of these prisons are, it's a long way from nowhere. And as was discussed, one of the most important things that I've always known, but it's been stressed much more to me, is how important the volunteers are. I mean, we should be so proud in this state of what we do with our volunteers out at that prison and the good that they do. One of our PRADA meetings at the Capitol a couple of months ago, we took a break, and when I come back in, I had a note up where I was sitting that a gentleman out there, and some of you good ladies were probably there, saying that he would like to visit with me before I left. And he was a gentleman that was in a wheelchair, after the meeting, I went out and spoke to him. And it was the day we had talked a lot about the volunteerism that goes on out there. And he mentioned that his life, in a sense, was saved as an inmate out there a few years earlier because of the volunteers and the people that worked with him and, in a sense, rehabilitated him. And I was talking to Catherine just before the meeting started and expressing that the two words that come to my mind a lot, and a lot of other people, is probably punishment and rehabilitation when we think of corrections, or we think of prisons, or we think of jails. But it goes way beyond that. And just before, after I listened to him, just before we concluded our conversation, he said, "Do you by any chance know Connie Anderson and her husband?" And I said, "Yeah, they're my neighbors." And anyway, those were the two volunteers that worked out there that he said had helped, in a sense, save his life or help turn him around. And I know these people very well, and you know, I love them for the good works that they have done out there, but they're just two of many. One of the prisons we toured in Arizona, excuse me, one of the things that we asked when the opportunity came up is how well the volunteerism worked there. And I remember at one of them, the gentleman that was responding back said, "Well, quite well, actually." And I said, "Well, how many volunteers do you think you have here?" And he said, "Well, somewhere between 13 and 15 people." And we have 1,500. So, and you know, I read out there on the Girl Scout motto, it says, about in the middle of it, it says, "To help people at all times." And I think that's something that we have to constantly stay focused on during this process, because there is one overriding issue, responsibility, need, and we've heard many people say that the things that we have, one of the highest imprisonment rates, and so on and so forth. And so this is the time to study the programs. Again, as we saw some of the programs in these other prisons, some were better, some were not as good, but we know that that's what rehabilitates people. As the mayor for 12 years, I've gone to a few graduations out. I forget which one it's the northernmost building, and it's Conquest. You know which one that is? Anyway, Promontory, that's right. And I've gone to the graduations where these people are being, in a sense, most of them fairly young too, being rehabilitated to re-enter back into society. So their mothers, fathers, wives, children, whatever, are there at the graduation, just like a group like you. As I said up there, it was a tearjerker. Every time I went to one of these, I had to make sure I took a couple of hankies with me, because they all said one thing: if it wasn't for alcohol and drugs, they wouldn't be there. And that they told their stories of how they ended up there. And it was a great reminder that there's good people that are out there because of the mistakes they've made. But we don't want them to stay out there. We want them to be rehabilitated and accepted back into society. And their families want them to come back home and be an active, productive member. I think some of the real questions is there a higher and better use for that property? I personally feel like, yeah, there is, because I've seen the whole city of Draper, almost every acre of it in my lifetime, change from one use to another. There's 700 acres out there, 300 of it is unoccupied. It was more for agricultural use. They used to do much more of their own food preparation, their meat production and processing. Those things aren't happening there. They need more space for storage, for refrigeration, for a lot of these programs that Steve referred to. So I see it as an economic opportunity, which I feel like sometimes we're almost looked down upon if we bring up the word economic opportunity. But there is economic opportunity, and there is probably a higher and better use. But we've got to prove that can all happen financially and also for the best good of those that are out there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our last speaker, and we will have questions and answers after Chairman Summerhays speaks. And he said he was the cleanup crew. He's going to talk about everything that everybody else missed. So, Chairman Summerhays graduated cum laude with a Bachelor of Science degree in accounting and completed an MBA at the University of Utah. He worked in public accounting with 2 national accounting firms, was the Senior Vice President and Chief Financial Officer of Alta Health Strategies Incorporated, and completed his career as President and Chief Executive Officer of the Workers' Compensation Fund. He has served the community, including the Greater Salt Lake Area Chamber of Commerce, Governor's Cabinet Council for 4 governors, United Way, Days of 47, University of Utah Crimson Club, the Utah Symphony and Opera, and several others. Currently, Chairman Summerhays serves as Director of the Workers' Compensation Fund in Continental Bank. He is Chair of the Board of Advantage Workers' Compensation Insurance Company and also serves as Chair of the Prison Relocation and Development Authority. I don't know when you've had time to have a family.
Thank you for being here tonight. I'm really impressed with this group. As a small boy, I remember driving by Sugar House Park, which then was the prison. And you think, as we've heard history, they started talking about moving that prison in the early 30s. There was the Depression and World War II, and it didn't actually get moved until 1951. So when we think about doing something with the prison now, we're going to do something regardless of what the decisions are right now, that are going to span the next 50 to 70 years. So it's a pretty important project that we're looking at. To frame the issue, there are about 7,700 inmates right now in Utah. 4,400 of those are in Draper. 1,600 of them are in Gunnison. And we have a wonderful state-of-the-art prison in Gunnison. The other 1,700 are housed in county jails. So we look at where we are today, and I'd frame this issue just a little bit differently. But before I start that, what real authority does PRADA have? I would tell you none. Because we will not make any decisions that impact anybody. Those decisions are left to the legislature and the governor. So as we began this work in July, I was a little bit stunned to see that we didn't have any real information that we could offer the public to say, this is a good idea or a bad idea to move the prison. So one of the goals that we have is that when we're done and we're making recommendations to the legislature, we'll have information and hard data that we can say, this is why we think this is a good idea, whatever that idea is. So that everybody can look at it, and you may not agree with that decision, but at least you'll be able to look at empirical data and some good reasons why somebody came to those conclusions. But I'd frame this issue just slightly different than we're going to move the prison or we're not going to move the prison. With 7,700 inmates today, we are at or a little bit beyond capacity. So we're at a point where within a year or two, maybe even now, we don't have capacity to put new prisoners. And there has to be some expansion somewhere. So I think the legislature has looked at expanding Gunnison in the recent sessions and have not had the political will to spend the money to expand Gunnison. But we're at a point where we're going to spend money on prisons regardless of whether we look at Draper and decide